The scent of her perfume, usually a comforting embrace, now clung to the air like a suffocating shroud, wrapping me in a truth I hadn't asked for, a truth that felt like a physical blow to the gut. My name is Daniel Hayes. For the past 7 years, I'd meticulously built my life around two seemingly unshakable pillars: my burgeoning career at Peagles Corporation, a prestigious firm where I was a senior analyst in corporate finance, and my marriage to Rachel. We had the kind of life people envied: a sleek, modern apartment overlooking Lake Michigan in downtown Chicago, spontaneous weekend getaways to Napa or the Hamptons, and a shared vision of a future that felt not just tangible, but inevitable. I was on the cusp of a major promotion, a move that would solidify our financial security and open doors to even greater opportunities. Patrick O'Connell, my boss, was more than just a superior. He was a mentor, a confidant, almost a friend. He'd guided me through countless complex deals, celebrated every milestone, and even offered sagely advice on navigating the intricacies of married life with Rachel. He was the kind of man I looked up to, a paragon of success and integrity. Or so I had foolishly believed until that Tuesday night when the carefully constructed facade of my world began to crack. It began subtly, a series of almost imperceptible shifts. A misplaced email in Rachel's inbox that vanished before I could properly read it. A hushed phone call she ended abruptly when I entered the room. Patrick's sudden, almost overly solicitous interest in my personal well-being. I rationalized it all away, of course. My own insecurities, the stress of the upcoming promotion, a touch of paranoia. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Until last Tuesday, I'd left my crucial presentation notes for the next morning's board meeting back at the office. The meeting was make or break for a multi-million-dollar acquisition, and those notes were my lifeline. The building was a ghost town when I returned, the only sound the hum of the HVAC system and the distant city traffic. As I approached my floor, a faint glow emanated from Patrick's office, his door slightly ajar. I heard voices, low and intimate, a murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. Rachel's laugh, light and familiar, yet imbued with a clandestine quality I'd never heard before, followed by Patrick's deeper conspiratorial rumble. My stomach lurched, a cold knot tightening in my gut. I froze, my hand still hovering over the cold metal of my own office doorknob. This wasn't a casual after-hours chat. The words that drifted out, fragmented and hushed, painted a picture so grotesque, so utterly unthinkable that my mind struggled to process it. The promotion? Daniel won't suspect. It's done. He'll be out by next quarter. Rachel's voice, laced with a strange, almost triumphant satisfaction, followed by Patrick's low chuckle. My world tilted on its axis. Promotion? What promotion? My promotion? And what was done? Out by next quarter? The pieces didn't just not fit, they formed a monstrous mosaic of deceit. It wasn't just an affair, a simple act of infidelity. This was something far more sinister, a calculated maneuver that went beyond the personal, striking at the very foundation of my professional life. It was a betrayal of the heart, yes, but also of trust, of loyalty, of everything I had worked for. A cold, hard realization settled in. I was a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing, and the players were the two people I trusted most. My first instinct was primal, to burst through that door, to unleash a torrent of rage and demand answers. But a strange, almost alien calm washed over me, a cold, clinical detachment that surprised even myself. My body, for a fleeting moment, felt like a statue, rooted to the spot, every muscle tensed, yet utterly still. Then, a switch flipped. The raw, searing pain was there, a dull, persistent ache in my chest, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of something else: clarity. My mind, usually prone to emotional outbursts in moments of crisis, was now working with an almost terrifying precision, processing, analyzing, strategizing. I retreated silently, my footsteps muffled by the thick, plush carpet of the executive hallway. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate drumbeat, but my hands remained steady as I retrieved my forgotten notes. I walked out of that building, into the cool, indifferent Chicago night, a different man. The vulnerability I'd felt moments before was rapidly hardening into something else, something sharper, more resilient. I replayed the fragmented conversation in my head, dissecting every word, every inflection, searching for nuances, for hidden meanings, for the full extent of their conspiracy. The promotion and Daniel won't suspect and out by next quarter echoed like a sinister mantra. This wasn't just a clandestine affair, it was an orchestrated plot, a corporate coup disguised as a marital indiscretion. It threatened to unravel not just my marriage, but my entire professional existence, my reputation, my future. I drove home on autopilot, the city lights blurring into streaks of color, my mind a whirlwind of calculations. I found Rachel asleep in our bed, her face serene, almost angelic, utterly innocent in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. I watched her, a stranger in my own home, a phantom limb of my former life, The urge to confront her, to shake her awake and demand the truth, to shatter her peaceful facade, was immense, almost overwhelming. But I held back. This wasn't a moment for raw, destructive emotion. This was a moment for cold, calculated strategy. I needed to understand the full scope of their deception, to gather irrefutable evidence, to see the entire chessboard before I made a single move. I needed to know who else was involved, how deep this rabbit hole went. The pain was a constant, gnawing presence, but it no longer paralyzed me. Instead, it fueled a new kind of clarity, a chilling resolve. I would observe, I would wait, I would learn, and then I would act. The next morning I walked into the gleaming Peebles Corporation lobby, a perfectly crafted smile plastered on my face, and greeted Patrick with a firm, confident handshake, my gaze unwavering. He looked me in the eye, his own expression a mask of geniality, utterly oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. Or so he thought. Rachel kissed me goodbye at the door, her lips tasting of deceit, her touch a lie. They believed their secret was safe, their plan foolproof, their victory assured. But they didn't know I was already watching, already calculating, already mapping out every single countermove. They didn't know the game had just begun, and I was about to change the rules in ways they could never possibly anticipate. If you want to witness the intricate unraveling of this betrayal and see how I turn the tables, make sure to subscribe and follow my journey. You won't want to miss what happens next. The days that followed were a masterclass in controlled deception, a performance I delivered with chilling precision. To Rachel, I was the same loving, slightly preoccupied husband, perhaps a little more attentive, a little more engaged in her day. To Patrick, I was the diligent, ambitious analyst, eager to prove my worth, even more so after the successful acquisition deal that had just closed. My smile was genuine enough to pass inspection, my laughter light, my eyes, I hoped, betrayed nothing of the storm raging within. I moved through our shared life, through the polished halls of Peebles Corporation like a ghost, present yet unseen, observing every flicker, every nuance. The pain was a constant companion, a dull, throbbing ache beneath my ribs, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had transmuted, hardening into a cold, sharp edge of resolve. Rachel, in her oblivious contentment, offered a myriad of subtle tells. She was more radiant, a new sparkle in her eyes, a spring in her step that I hadn't seen in months. She attributed it to a new yoga class, a renewed focus on her well-being. I nodded, smiled, and filed it away. Her phone, once an extension of her hand, was now guarded, face down on surfaces, notifications silenced. She'd disappear for errands that stretched longer than usual, returning with vague explanations and a faint, unfamiliar scent that wasn't her usual perfume. Once, I saw her quickly close a messaging app on her laptop when I walked into the living room, a fleeting shadow of panic in her eyes. "Just catching up on some old emails," she'd said, too quickly, too brightly. I pretended to believe her, my mind cataloging the micro-expressions, the defensive posture, the subtle shift in her tone. Patrick, on the other hand, was a more seasoned player. His facade was impenetrable, his professional demeanor unwavering. Yet, under my newly sharpened gaze, even his polished exterior began to show hairline fractures. He'd occasionally glance at Rachel during company events, a fleeting, possessive look that lasted only a fraction of a second, but long enough for me to catch. He'd praise my work with an almost excessive enthusiasm, a subtle overcompensation that now felt like a thinly veiled attempt to assuage his own guilt, or perhaps to keep me off balance. During a team lunch, he made an offhand comment about loyalty being a rare commodity these days, his eyes briefly meeting mine. A flicker of something unreadable there. Was it a challenge, a warning, or just a projection of his own duplicity? I didn't react, merely nodded thoughtfully, a silent observer in my own unfolding tragedy. The rage, once a hot, blinding inferno, had cooled into a precise surgical instrument. It wasn't about vengeance in the emotional sense anymore. It was about justice, about dismantling their carefully constructed lie piece by calculated piece. My strategy began with information. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable evidence that would expose not just the affair, but the professional sabotage. My first step was digital. I installed a discreet monitoring software on Rachel's laptop, something I'd learned about from a tech-savvy colleague years ago, designed for parental control but easily repurposed. It was a violation of trust, yes, but trust had already been incinerated. I needed to see her communications, her browsing history, her digital footprint. I also started a meticulous log of my own. Every interaction with Patrick, every conversation with Rachel, every suspicious glance or unexplained absence, it all went into a secure, encrypted document on my personal cloud drive. Dates, times, specific quotes, my observations. I was building a case, not for a divorce lawyer yet, but for myself, for the moment of reckoning. At work, I began to subtly shift my focus. I started volunteering for projects that gave me access to broader company data, particularly anything related to personnel changes, performance reviews, or internal investigations. I made sure my own work was impeccable, beyond reproach, leaving no possible opening for them to exploit. I also started cultivating relationships with colleagues in other departments, particularly HR and IT, building a network of informal allies, people who might inadvertently provide a piece of the puzzle. I made casual inquiries about company policies regarding executive conduct, conflict of interest, and the process for reporting ethical breaches. I phrased them as hypothetical scenarios, just curious about how things work around here. But my intent was anything but casual. I was mapping the battlefield, understanding the rules of engagement. One evening, while Rachel was out with friends, the monitoring software on her laptop pinged a new email from Patrick. My heart hammered, a cold dread mixing with a surge of adrenaline. I opened the encrypted log, my fingers trembling slightly as I navigated to the captured email. It was short, almost terse. Meeting with HR confirmed for Thursday. Daniel's Q3 performance review. Make sure the concerns are well documented. We need to make this airtight. My breath hitched. Q3 performance review? My Q3 performance had been stellar, exceeding all targets. Concerns? This wasn't just an affair, this was a full-blown corporate hit job. They weren't just sleeping together, they were actively conspiring to destroy my career. The email confirmed everything I had suspected, and more. It wasn't just about getting me fired. It was about fabricating a reason, a paper trail of manufactured incompetence. The cold rage solidified into a diamond-hard resolve. They wanted a fight. They were about to get one, but not the one they expected. The next morning, I arrived at Peebles Corporation earlier than usual. I walked past Patrick's office, the door still closed, and made my way to my own. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. The promotion Rachel had mentioned, the out by next quarter. It wasn't my promotion they were discussing, it was his. And my removal was a prerequisite. I logged into my computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I needed to see my Q3 performance review, the official one, before Patrick could tamper with it. I knew the system, knew the loopholes. Within minutes, I had it open, a pristine document filled with glowing remarks and top ratings. I saved a copy, time-stamped and encrypted, to my personal drive. Then, I did something else, something that would irrevocably alter the game. I accessed the company's internal HR portal, the one where employees could anonymously report ethical violations. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. I began to type, detailing a pattern of suspicious behavior, a potential conflict of interest, and an alleged affair between a senior executive and a subordinate spouse, all without naming names directly, but providing enough circumstantial evidence to trigger an investigation. I hit send, a silent, almost imperceptible click that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet office. The board had just been flipped. The anonymous report, a carefully crafted missive devoid of emotional rhetoric, was a fuse lit in the corporate labyrinth. The initial spark was imperceptible to most, but to my hyper-tuned senses, the vibrations were immediate. The executive floor, usually a symphony of controlled ambition, began to hum with a discordant undercurrent. Patrick O'Connell, once the epitome of corporate swagger, started to exhibit subtle yet telling signs of distress. His meticulously tailored suits seemed to hang a little looser, his usually impeccable hair occasionally disheveled. His laughter, once booming, became brittle, often cutting off abruptly. He spent an increasing amount of time behind his closed office door, the muffled cadence of his voice suggesting intense, often strained conversations. I observed it all, a silent, unblinking sentinel, my own demeanor a perfect mirror of professional calm. My performance, already stellar, became even more flawless, a shield against any potential scrutiny, a testament to my unwavering commitment to Peebles Corporation. I even offered Patrick assistance on a complex financial model, a gesture of feigned loyalty that he, in his growing distraction, gratefully accepted. This allowed me deeper, ostensibly legitimate, access to his current projects, to his digital footprint, to the very heart of his professional operations. I was not merely watching, I was infiltrating, gathering intelligence from within the enemy's camp. My next move was to subtly reinforce the initial anonymous report. I understood the mechanics of internal investigations, particularly those spearheaded by Ms. Evelyn Reed, the head of employee relations. An isolated anonymous tip, even one hinting at executive misconduct, would rarely trigger a full-blown inquiry into a figure as prominent as Patrick. It required corroboration, a series of carefully placed breadcrumbs leading to an undeniable conclusion. I began to accidentally leave certain documents in plain sight on my desk when I knew Evelyn would be passing by, a printout of an email chain between Patrick and Rachel discussing project timelines that, to an outsider, looked innocuous, but to my informed perspective, screamed coded communication. I'd forget to log out of my computer, leaving open a spreadsheet that subtly highlighted discrepancies in project budgets under Patrick's purview, discrepancies that, with the right context, could be linked to his personal expenses, These were not smoking guns, but rather carefully positioned markers, designed to guide the investigator's gaze without revealing the hand that placed them. I also made a point of engaging Evelyn in seemingly casual conversations about corporate ethics, the importance of transparency, and the potential damage of internal conflicts of interest. My questions were framed as intellectual curiosities, but their underlying intent was to subtly prime her for the information she was about to uncover. Rachel, insulated by her own self-deception and Patrick's increasingly frantic attempts to manage the situation, began to feel the peripheral tremors. She complained about Patrick being stressed and distant, attributing it to the pressures of his executive role. Her clandestine phone calls, once discreetly hushed, became more agitated, her whispered conversations laced with frustration and a growing sense of unease. One evening I overheard her on the phone, her voice tight with barely suppressed anger. "He's acting like a paranoid fool, Rachel. He thinks someone's watching him. He's even questioning my loyalty to him." The bitter irony was almost palatable. Patrick, the master manipulator, was now experiencing the very paranoia he had sought to inflict upon me. He was turning on his accomplice, a predictable yet satisfying development. I watched Rachel's face contort with a mixture of fear and resentment, her carefully constructed world beginning to show its own cracks. Their alliance, forged in deceit and ambition, was beginning to fray under the slightest pressure, a testament to the corrosive nature of their shared secret. The emotional justice I sought was not in a public spectacle of rage, but in the quiet, methodical dismantling of their intertwined deceptions. The feeling of control was intoxicating, a cold, clear rush that replaced the burning ache of betrayal. I was no longer the victim, but the architect of their downfall. Every calculated move, every subtle manipulation, brought a chilling sense of satisfaction. My emotions were locked away, replaced by a clinical focus, a detached precision. I was a surgeon, meticulously dissecting a cancerous growth for my life. I found myself anticipating their reactions, predicting their next desperate moves, and preparing my counterstrikes before they even knew they were under attack. I had become an astute observer of human nature at its most flawed, and I was using that knowledge to my absolute advantage. The office, once a place of ambition and camaraderie, was now my chessboard, and I was playing a game of high stakes where the pieces were their reputations, their careers, their very identities. The corporate landscape, with its intricate rules and unspoken power dynamics, was my arena, and I was mastering its every nuance. Through my accidental access to Patrick's shared network drives and my careful monitoring of his digital communications, I discovered the full extent of his professional malfeasance. He had indeed been systematically undermining my projects, subtly shifting credit to less deserving colleagues, delaying critical approvals, and even planting seeds of doubt about my leadership capabilities to senior management. He had been building a meticulously fabricated case against me, a narrative of underperformance designed to justify my eventual dismissal and clear the path for his own ascent, likely with Rachel as a silent partner in his new, elevated status. The email to Rachel about the Q3 performance review was not an isolated incident. It was a single thread in a larger, more insidious tapestry of corporate sabotage. I meticulously documented every instance, cross-referencing dates, email timestamps, project reports, and performance metrics. This wasn't just about personal revenge. It was about exposing a systemic abuse of power, a profound betrayal of corporate trust that extended far beyond the confines of my personal life. My final, crucial step in this phase involved a carefully orchestrated, untraceable leak. I compiled a comprehensive dossier of the most damning evidence. My original glowing Q3 performance review, starkly contrasted with later, subtly altered versions containing fabricated concerns. The email exchanges between Patrick and Rachel, anonymized, of course, to protect my source and maintain the illusion of an internal whistleblower, and the detailed evidence of the subtle sabotage of my projects. I formatted it as an anonymous tip, ensuring it looked like it originated from a disgruntled yet well-informed employee, someone close enough to Patrick to have access to such sensitive information, but definitively not me. I sent it to a specific, trusted member of the board of directors, a woman known for her unwavering integrity, her sharp intellect, and her zero-tolerance policy for corporate malfeasance. The email was dispatched from a burner account, untraceable, leaving no digital fingerprints back to my personal devices or corporate network. The next morning, the corporate world I inhabited shifted on its axis. An email, terse and formal, landed in my inbox along with every other senior manager. It was from the CEO himself, a rare and significant occurrence. Due to unforeseen circumstances and ongoing internal review, Mr. Patrick O'Connell has been placed on immediate administrative leave, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. All direct reports will temporarily report to Ms. Evelyn Reed. A cold, triumphant smile touched my lips, a fleeting expression of satisfaction that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The first domino had fallen precisely as calculated. The stage was set. The revelation was no longer a distant possibility. It was imminent, a storm gathering on the horizon. I looked at Rachel across the breakfast table, her face still etched with the vague anxieties of the past few days, completely unaware that the carefully constructed ground beneath her feet was about to give way, irrevocably. The silence between us was heavy, pregnant with unspoken truths, and I knew with a chilling certainty that by tomorrow everything would change. The corporate machine, once a tool of their ambition, was now a weapon in my hand, poised for the final decisive strike. The air in the Peebles Corporation boardroom was thick with an almost palpable tension, a silence so profound it hummed. Every executive, every board member sat ramrod straight, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and grim understanding. Evelyn Reed, her usual composed demeanor replaced by a steely resolve, projected a series of slides onto the large screen. Each slide was a meticulously compiled piece of evidence, my original Q3 performance review, followed by the doctored versions, email chains between Patrick and Rachel, anonymized but damning in their content, detailing the plot to undermine my career, financial discrepancies linked to Patrick's expense reports, and finally, a summary of the anonymous tip that had triggered the investigation. The narrative was clear, irrefutable, and devastating. Patrick O'Connell, seated at the far end of the table, his face ashen, tried to interject, to deny, to bluster, but his words were weak, his usual charisma utterly evaporated. The weight of the evidence, presented with cold, corporate precision, crushed him. He was no longer the powerful executive. He was a cornered man, his carefully constructed empire crumbling around him. The CEO, a man of few words but immense authority, listened intently, his gaze occasionally flicking to Patrick, then to me, then back to the screen. When Evelyn finished, the CEO cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the silence. "Mr. O'Connell," he began, his voice low but firm, "your employment with Peebles Corporation is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. Furthermore, the company will be pursuing legal action regarding the misappropriation of funds and the deliberate sabotage of an employee's career." Patrick slumped in his chair, defeated. His fall was swift, absolute, and utterly devoid of the dramatic flair he so often cultivated. It was a corporate execution, clean and precise. The scene at home was equally devoid of drama, though far more personal. Rachel had been called into Evelyn Reed's office earlier that day, ostensibly for a routine HR inquiry. She returned home, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed, a crumpled document clutched in her hand. She found me in the living room, staring out at the city lights, a glass of amber liquid in my hand. She didn't need to say a word. The document, a formal letter from Peebles Corporation's legal department, outlined her complicity, her role in the conspiracy, and the immediate termination of her consulting contract with the firm, a contract I hadn't even known existed until Evelyn's investigation uncovered it. Her betrayal ran deeper than I had ever imagined. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, searching for a flicker of the man she had married, the man she had so carelessly discarded. But that man was gone, replaced by a cold, resolute stranger. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I can explain." I simply shook my head, my gaze unwavering. I placed a pre-prepared document on the coffee table between us. It was a divorce petition, meticulously drafted, outlining the terms, the division of assets, everything. "Sign it," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, as my assistant. The words hung in the air, a chilling echo of her own ambition, her own betrayal. She stared at the papers, then at me, a dawning horror in her eyes as she finally understood the full extent of my transformation, the cold, calculated justice I had wrought. She picked up the pen, her hand trembling, and signed. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper was the only sound in the room, a final definitive stroke that severed the last thread of our shared life. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled. Patrick O'Connell became a cautionary tale whispered in corporate circles, his name synonymous with disgrace. Rachel disappeared from my life, a ghost of a memory, her ambition having cost her everything. I remained at Peebles Corporation, not just as a senior analyst, but as a figure of quiet respect, a man who had navigated a treacherous landscape and emerged stronger. The promotion that had been dangled as bait, then snatched away, was now mine, offered with genuine admiration, not as a consolation prize. I declined it. The corporate game, while I had mastered it, no longer held the same allure. My priorities had shifted. The experience had stripped away the superficial, revealing the core of who I was and who I wanted to be. I sold the apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, the one filled with memories, both good and now irrevocably tainted. I moved to a smaller, quieter place on the outskirts of the city, a sanctuary where the hum of the metropolis was a distant murmur, not a constant presence. I started investing more time in my passions, in the quiet pursuit of knowledge, in the simple pleasure of a good book or a long walk. The scars of betrayal remained, a faint but permanent etching on my soul, but they no longer defined me. They were a reminder, A lesson learned, a crucible through which a new, more resilient self had emerged. I was free, not just from a toxic marriage and a treacherous boss, but from the naive illusions that had once governed my life. The world, once a place of predictable paths, now stretched before me, vast and open, filled with possibilities I had never considered. I was no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had reclaimed. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the city lights twinkling in the distance, a cool breeze ruffling my hair. The past was a distant echo, a story told, a chapter closed. The future was unwritten, a blank page waiting for a new narrative. The man who had once been Daniel Hayes, the ambitious executive, the trusting husband, was gone. In his place stood someone else, someone forged in the fires of betrayal, tempered by cold resolve, and ultimately liberated by his own quiet strength. I raised my glass, not in a toast to revenge, but to the quiet, chilling power of self-preservation. Some lessons are learned the hard way. This one I learned with ice in my veins. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button.